It was a crisp October evening in the small town of Maplewood, where mist hung low over the streets, wrapping around the lampposts and smudging their light into weak, ghostly auras. 12-year-old Liam trudged down the damp road, clutching his backpack tightly to his chest. He had stayed late at the library to finish his report on The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, one of the books that had mysteriously fascinated him. His mother would be upset, he knew, but that fear was nothing compared to the strange, unsettling feeling that had clung to him all day. Ever since he'd left the library, he'd had the eerie sensation that he was being watched. The street was silent, but for his footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. Leaves, slick with rain, rustled underfoot, adding a muted crackle to the night. The mist was thickening, twisting like smoke, swallowing up the dim glow of houses. Liam kept looking over his shoulder, his heart thudding in his chest. But each time there was nothing there. Just the same deserted street and the whispering mist. Just my imagination, he muttered to himself, though the words did little to comfort him. Then he heard it. A soft shuffle, almost like footsteps behind him. A surge of cold terror jolted through him. He stopped dead in his tracks, straining to listen, but the sound ceased. He glanced around, his eyes darting over the fog-drenched street. Nothing moved, but then he caught it. A shadow, just barely there, at the edge of his vision, partially concealed by a twisted oak tree. Liam's breath hitched. He forced himself to keep walking, picking up his pace. But the footsteps returned, louder this time, crunching on the leaves just a few steps behind him. He couldn't resist any more. He whipped around, and the figure froze in place. It was a man, tall, gaunt, with a long shabby coat that seemed to blend with the mist. His face was obscured, the hood of his coat casting deep shadows that left only a sliver of his chin visible. A chin with a sickly, pale hue, thin and sharp as if starved. Liam's heart raced as he took in the sight of his hands, pale and bony, curled at his sides like claws. "Hello?" Liam's voice was barely a whisper, choked with fear. The man didn't answer, didn't move. He simply stood there, head tilted slightly to the side, his form unnaturally still. Liam's fingers gripped the straps of his backpack so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs felt cemented to the ground, as though the fog itself had reached out and wound around his ankles. Then, slowly, the man took a step forward, his foot landing with an eerie, deliberate crunch. Liam turned and bolted, his feet pounding against the pavement, but he heard the man's footsteps quicken, heavy and relentless, a rhythm that mirrored his own, closing the distance with every frantic step. He reached his house, almost tripping as he fumbled for his keys. The footsteps were closer now, louder, until he could feel the man's cold breath on his neck, a sour, damp scent like rotting leaves and stagnant water. His hands shook as he shoved the key into the lock, turning it just as a raspy voice whispered from inches behind him. "Liam!" He threw himself inside, slamming the door shut and twisting the lock. He stumbled backward, his breath heaving in his chest. Through the small peephole, he could see the man's silhouette, looming in the mist. The figure stood there, motionless, before slowly, agonizingly, tilting its head down toward the peephole. Liam's heart skipped as a pair of hollow, inhuman eyes stared back at him, milky and unfocused, like they had seen something too terrifying to bear and had been forever blinded by it. And then, the man raised one of his hands and began tapping on the door with one crooked finger. Tap, tap, sound was soft, almost polite, but each knock sent a shiver down Liam's spine. Hours later, when the police finally arrived, they found no sign of the man, no footprints, no disturbances in the mist. But they did find one thing: a scrap of paper, smeared and crumpled, tucked beneath Liam's front door. On it was scrawled in jagged, childlike handwriting, "I'll be seeing you soon." From then on, every time Liam left the house alone, he could swear he saw the shadow lurking just beyond the streetlight, hidden in the fog, waiting for the moment he would be alone again. The following nights were sleepless, and to this day, even as a grown man, Liam still swears he hears the tap, tap,